What comes to my mind is what happened in my daughter's life. She grew up as a typical Christian girl. She always got good grades and made good decisions. Her brothers often referred to her as Miss Perfect. She had vision and dreams to become an interior designer and for fashion. Then she met an older man after her first year at college. We had no idea that this man was addicted to heavy narcotics. They eloped after only knowing each other about 2 months. Then we started to see less and less of Lisa. During this time, he and the drugs kept her isolated in a small one-bedroom apartment, away from friends, family, and help. During this time, God started to call our friends and family members for prayer. There were people praying on a regular basis all over the country. Many times, we would get together and pray in small groups. God would give us specific things to pray, like, God, tear up her nest where she's comfortable, just like a mother eagle would tear up a baby's nest when it was time for the baby to leave. We continued to pray faithfully, but it became more and more difficult. At one point, our hopes were raised when Lisa divorced him, but a short time later, they were back together again. Time and time again, we would reach out to Lisa only to be pushed away. It got to a point where our relationship was like a bruise. When you have a bruise, you hold it away from people because you don't want to get hurt again. Holidays were especially difficult. Her empty place at the dinner table became a painful reminder of seemingly unanswered prayer. During our most discouraging times, it seemed like God would always gather us together in family prayer meetings where He would give us just enough hope to go on.
Wednesday evening, I was burdened as usual, and I decided I need to drive to Dwell to get into a spiritual place where I could meditate and soak and pray on Lisa. As the burden got so heavy with her, it was hard for me sometimes to even pray. I could visualize handing her over to God. So as I was on my way to Dwell, I received a phone call, and it was Lisa. I hadn't heard from her for several months. And I asked if this was a good time to come see her, and she said to come on over. So I went over there immediately and sat down on the couch, and we talked. We visited heart to heart, mother to daughter. And she shared her heart with me, and I shared my heart with her of how much I missed her. And we held on to each other for quite a while. And then Lisa bared and unburdened her soul to me at that time and told me something I had suspected for quite some time, that she was indeed addicted to drugs. It was a difficult decision for me to make, to stay there and hold her and reassure her, or to obey the urgency, the deep urgency I had to get back to Dwell. Well, it was driving rain as I headed back to Northview, and I knew within myself the strong urgency. I just knew I had to get to Northview and find someone to pray with me. I spotted Emily in the back, and I went to her, and I told her, I said, I need to pray with somebody tonight. Is there anybody available? And she shook her head yes, and I said, are they available now? And she shook her head yes, and she said, just give me a few moments, and I'll round somebody up. In just a few seconds, Emily came running around the corner with a group of ladies with her. They sat down beside me and asked if it was okay if they could anoint me at the altar. So we all went down to the altar and knelt. And they anointed me with oil and began to pray out loud at times, and individually, and sometimes as a group. Our voices were all lifted up together. And I believe it was the most urgency I have ever felt to pray for Lisa that night. I was trembling, and I was shaking, and I was weeping. And we were all putting our voices up and storming the gates of heaven for God's help at that point. different verses were let out and quoted. One was, "Therefore there be no condemnation." And I remember the other called out by another friend there, and it was that since Lisa was not able to get out and go for help, that God would send an ambassador to her to meet her needs. But at the moment we all finished together, we just all sensed that what needed to be done was done. We had prayed that Lisa would be set free from this addiction. And we all stopped at one time realizing it was done. No more needed to be prayed at that point. There was a huge release, as we all knew without a doubt that something had taken place.
Jesus, Jesus, how I trust you, how I've proved to all endure. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus.
And God did send an ambassador into our daughter's life in the person of a young man named Richard. Through a series of circumstances that are so complicated, they're hard to relate, Lisa came to know Richard. Richard turned out to be a person who was uniquely suited to speak into her life. Their interests, their talents and abilities mesh and flow together. That's what prayer means to me. It's real and it's alive. Does prayer make a difference? It did to my daughter Lisa. I believe that this is just the beginning of what we'll see through prayer. When God's people pray, He listens.
Come pull me through.